Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name is Frankie, and in today's video we are back in our Australian themed mini zoo, the Outback Track, and we're going to be building for what I think of as kind of the poster boy for Australian wildlife, and that is the Red Kangaroo. So to start off with this habitat, we're doing a little bit of terraforming, doing some terrain alterations, and what I've got in mind here is that I want to have a raised area where we can have a little restaurant that looks over the rest of the habitat. The habitat itself is going to be slightly sunken at the front so that our guests can look down at the animals, and then it raises up to being general ground level near the rear of the habitat. This is loosely inspired by the habitat for the emus and the wallabies at London Zoo. There is a nice backdrop of a mountain at that habitat in particular, and I'm not going to be replicating that in this one today. Maybe I'll come back and add that in the future, just because it is a wonderful piece of scenery. It really helps to guide your eye around the habitat. But I decided not to go for it with this one, just because I'm not sure how it's going to fit with the next habitats as well, having this big thing in the background. But it's something that we can definitely explore in the future. Now for the pathing, I did play about with various options. Here you can see me doing the wooden slats, and there's just something a bit too clean about them. I end up actually testing it on the whole of this area, and they just look too clean and polished. I don't really like them. So I'm going for a bit more of a bleached wood look instead, something that looks a bit more rustic and is more in line with what we've done for the rest of this zoo so far. Now for the observant among you, you may have already noticed that I have already added our restaurant, and I am going to be using a blueprint for this one. I'm going to be using the blueprint from the Oceania pack, just because I think it fits the vibe that we got for this part of the zoo kind of perfectly, and I am a Planet Zoo builder that tends to kind of go by the advice of, if you can do something easily, do it. Like, I wasn't too precious about how this restaurant looked. Don't need it to be unique. I like to put most of my effort into the actual habitats themselves, so I'm going to go for a blueprint. There's no shame in it whatsoever. In order to secure this area and make it look a bit less round, because at the moment it's just some muddy mounds up against the path, I'm going to use various red desert rock pieces. We're going to sink them into the ground at different levels and stuff, and the reason that we're using this rock is because it's the one that we have used throughout the entire zoo. Whenever we want to use rocks in scenery around the zoo, we've been using the red desert rocks, and we did that from the entrance area. I think it really nicely fits with the colour palette that we've got going on for this zoo. It does make it look like very dry and sun-baked, and yeah, I just think it's the right type of rock to be using. Now saying that, I could also use some of the other desert rocks and kind of intersperse it a little bit to give it a bit more of a more natural look, I guess, because in nature, randomness is key. You're gonna have variety. So I guess using a different type of rock in amongst this would kind of be beneficial. Maybe something I should experiment with in the future. Let me know if you agree in the comments below. And speaking of comments, I want to know, because while I was building this, I had a conversation with my wife about what the most iconic Australian animal is. In my opinion, when I think of Australia, the animal that I think of straight away is the kangaroo. But for her, it's a koala, and she reckons that's more of a recent development. That when we were younger, everyone would have said kangaroo, but now it's more koala. So, in the comments down below, let me know, when you think of Australia, what animal do you think of? Are you in team koala, team kangaroo, or are you going to come at me with, like, a skink or something bizarre like that? Once all of that rock work was done, I could move on to actually starting to shape our habitat, and like I mentioned before, I want the front area to be sunken. And the idea of what this habitat became kind of came to me as I was building it. Initially it was going to be quite close to the wallaby and emu habitat from London Zoo, but I ended up changing it quite a bit, and I'm really happy that I did. So the idea that I end up landing on is that this front portion, where you're going to be able to look down on the animals, it's going to have a tiny stream running through it. We're going to have a natural water source, which in this zoo we don't have many so far, due to the fact that it's quite a dry and arid environment we've been avoiding that kind of thing. We've been going for a lot of man-made stuff, but here we're going to have something that looks quite natural, and it's going to result in a bit of an oasis. Down the front area we're going to have the water, and it's going to be teeming with plants and stuff, and then as you move to the rear of the habitat it's going to become a little bit less dense, I guess, with foliage. It's going to be a bit more patchy, and it's going to turn into a bit more of a grasslands environment back there, kind of like the kangaroos are just hopping along the plains coming to find some water. That's the kind of thing that we're going to go for with this habitat, and we're going to try and make multiple levels. You can see I sunk down that area at the front, and then I kind of make, I would say, 3 levels just by using the flatten to foundation tool to get the heights that I want, and then smoothing out a little bit so that it's not too sudden. After adding more desert rocks to the front portion of the perimeter of this habitat, it is time to actually create the perimeter of the habitat using some barriers. Now I'm going to be using the chain link fence, and I'm going to cover the posts using some Australian wood pieces, and for me, I really like doing this. It's a really simple way to get some personalised fencing. You don't always have to build things from scratch. What you can do is rely on the in-game barriers like the chain link fence, and then cover certain sections of it to kind of personalise it a little bit. So this is something that I do fairly frequently. Use a chain link fence and then cover up the post with something a bit more decorative to add that little bit of personality. And I will point out that I'm only going to be doing the custom kind of fence at the front of the habitat, because that's the only portion the guests are going to see. It's the bit that needs to look pretty. The rest of it, cost effectiveness wise, we should be keeping it simple. As I wanted the entrance to this habitat for our keepers to be fairly hidden, it ends up having a bit of a windy path near the rear of the habitat that doesn't look the nicest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a bunch more desert rocks and mix up a load of foliage and stuff around here to kind of blend it into the surroundings, make it seem more like a nature route that only the staff can go down, and make the ugliness of it be invisible to our guests. Inside the habitat, it's time to build ourselves a little trench, and the easiest way to do this is using the terrain editing tools. Just go over to push and then just give the ground a little tap, get it to a depth that you're happy with, just a little shove, and then go over to the flatten to terrain tool and you can basically draw your water source. This is how I do it basically every single time. Yeah, it's nice and effective. So that is where our water is going to go. We're just going to test to make sure that it would fill it nicely, and it does. The only worry that I have is that the banks to this little river are quite steep, so we're going to use some of the terrain editing tools again to help to level it out a little bit and make it a softer incline for our animals to get down to the water. Now, just like what I said with the restaurant, we are going to be using a blueprint for our shelter. It does the job. I don't need to put in all the extra effort to make something really extravagant. This is for me, the zoo, no one else, so I'm going to use a nice little tin shed. Now, with most of the Australian animals, I'm assuming that our kangaroos have a fairly low threshold for what they can have in terms of plant life. Most of the animals that come from Australia seem to have quite a low percentage of plant coverage, meaning that you're going to be limited to what you can really do. So one way that I always combat that is by using rocks. Love to make little rocky outcrops. So we're going to put some along the edge of this water source, and we're going to have a few dotted about the actual habitat as well. Nothing too crazy, but something to keep the flat areas looking interesting. Next up is time for the terrain distribution needs, and these guys are really easy to please actually. I was really happy with the fact that I could get rid of most of the long grass, because I'm just not a fan of how long grass looks in this game. Saying that, this biome in particular, this Oceania grassland, I think, or desert, no, it's grassland, yeah. The long grass here isn't the worst actually. I don't mind it too much. Some of it is awful, but the stuff here isn't too bad. But yeah, any time that I can get rid of it, I'm happy to do so. So we're going to plaster this habitat with short grass, and then we do go into the red with the long grass, so we're going to focus that at the back of the habitat where you're less likely to see it. And then after that we can move on to our enrichment items for animals. We want to make sure our animals are using up the whole of the habitat, so we're going to spread these enrichment items out to encourage them to move about. Now it's on to what is always the best part of the video, and that is the nature time lapse, where I shut up and you guys get to enjoy some wonderful planting and Floki's fact of the day. Thank you so much for having watched this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more Planet Zoo Console Edition content. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I will see you later.